Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. My guest tonight is Lynchburg optometrist Dr. Frank Villa. Dr. Villa is an accomplished mountain climber who uses the love for the sport to help those in need. Frank, welcome to Lynchburg Live.
Thank you, Linda. Pleasure being here.
You know, as we get started, can you just tell us how long you've practiced optometry?
Been practicing for 32 years now.
Oh.
It's gone by quickly. Graduated optometry school in 1982, so that's a lot of years gone by.
Have you been primarily in Lynchburg, or were you someplace before you came here?
I did a payback for the military for 3 years where I was stationed at Fort Eustis. And then after that, I moved to Lynchburg area and have been enjoying the community here since then.
I was going to ask you what made you choose Lynchburg, but you know, it's so obvious that it's such a good family place. And
well, I thought, at the time I didn't have a family. I really just looked west and saw the mountains, and it's something that's always drawn me. I remember the first time I ever drove down the Interstate 64, and you got to that first rise heading toward Charlottesville, and you saw the mountains going off, and I just, had a love for it, and there was an office that was open from a practitioner, and I came to work here and settled down, and then the family issues became more important, as you say.
Well, we do have beautiful mountains in this area. I'm from North Carolina, and I was used to everything being perfectly flat. All right, you mentioned Fort Eustis, and you were chief of optometry and administrative chief of the ENT clinic?
Well, eventually I got there. I started off as a low-end Indian on the totem pole and worked my way up as people moved out. Very interesting time during the service, but a very quiet time. The only action that our military saw at that point was we invaded Grenada. So it was mostly seeing patients and doing some military duties.
Being a former OR nurse, the ENT thing interested me too, that you did that. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, you're a participant in the eye missions to Haiti and Guatemala. How long have you been doing that?
The Haiti mission was actually a group called SOSH, Student Optometric Service to Humanity. And during our time in optometry school, the students had an organization where we gathered funds, gathered glasses, and went to a mission site in Haiti that had been an ongoing concern for a number of years. Every year they'd send students back down there. So it was a self-funded group that had a proctoring optometrist who went along with us, and we saw hundreds of patients. That venture evolved into the VOSH, which is the Volunteer Optometric Service to Humanity, of which there was a Pennsylvania group where I went to school, and my roommate was the president of the Pennsylvania group, and my then girlfriend was the president of the SOSH group. So I got voluntold, I guess, to join up on those programs.
And are you still involved with this?
I've gone on VOSH missions usually every other year for a number of years. I really have lost count of the number of missions that I've done.
Now, is it just Haiti and Guatemala, or do you go other places?
Peru, Nicaragua.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm hopeful to go to Ecuador at some point because I understand they have big mountains too, and I wanted to climb around on those a little bit. Usually there's an intensive clinical situation where you see patients for 4 or 5 days. And then you'll have some form of R&R. And if
there's a mountain.
If there's a mountain, I usually try to get close to it. But I am not an accomplished mountaineer. I'm a trekker. And all the mountains I've done have been walk-ups. If you can put one foot in front of your other and breathe as you're going uphill, and get to the top, you're okay. There's no cramponing, there's no roping in, there's no having to do rappelling. There's nothing that involves my head being upside down and the earth being below me.
But still, that's such an accomplishment. You do realize that the majority of us don't do that even just putting the one foot in front of the other,
Well,
where a mountain is concerned?
they're right in the backyard here, and they're certainly easy to get out and do it and enjoy them.
Well, your eye missions, let me ask you one more thing about that. Do you go with a team of people?
Usually the groups involve anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 doctors, and then there'll be lay people who come along to help, dispense glasses, do visual acuities, other testing that they can do. There's always something. There's always another need for another pair of hands to go along. This summer, when I went on my Nicaragua trip, my son came with me. Previous year, my daughter went with me to a Guatemala mission.
What an opportunity for them. I mean, I think that's a great opportunity.
I think it was a real eye-opener. They really, truly do have privileged lives here in America, and it was interesting and an eye-opener for them to see what the vast majority of people in Central America don't have. It's not a matter of what they have; it's a matter of,
what they don't.
There's a lot of don't there and there.
Tell me, how long do the trips last? Are you there for a week or 2 weeks, or?
Yeah, it's a week and an extra weekend. Sometimes there's a couple days involved in travel time.
Oh, sure.
One of my first mission trips to Guatemala, we landed at the airport, and I think it was about 100-kilometer, it's about 60-mile ride to the town that we were going in on dirt roads, and we literally had 2 flat tires on the way in. And the vehicle that we were driving in had 2 spare tires just in case they had a flat tire because the roads were that bad.
Oh, my goodness. Now, you mentioned a couple of organizations that the trips are associated with. Could you tell us what they are?
The VOSH group is actually an international group. There's different chapters, and each one of those chapters has a different country that they have a focus in to try to add continuity to the care. The trip that I took to Peru was with VOSH Indiana, and they go to the same clinic 2 or 3 times a year. So they're at the same spot. They're seeing a continuation of care for patients. If somebody has glaucoma, they need to be followed up.
Exactly.
If they've had cataract surgery, they need to have follow-up. And usually the surgeries are done by either in-country surgeons, or in that instance there was a group of ophthalmologists who came in after we pre-screened the patients who needed cataract surgery. They were scheduled for the surgery, and then the next optometric group comes in and does a follow-up on the patients.
Did you see patients of all ages, or?
We do. They're in the mother's arms to being wheeled in wheelchairs.
They just have no exposure to anything like optometric care.
Or general health care. Sometimes we combine the missions with other medical groups that are doing screenings in health care. Some of these areas are very, very rural. The Guatemala mission trip that we've gone to is an area, Peten's the size of Rhode Island, and they had one eye doctor in the Peten before we started coming in there, and had a patient population of 500,000. So that's,
do you see diseases of the eye that are primarily, or some of them associated with their poverty conditions, the living conditions that they're in, or is it just neglect because they have to?
Well, there's a certain amount of injuries that you see because of their life that they deal with. Almost all the young men that work out in the field deal with a machete, and something hit them in the eye, and they'll see big scars on their eyes.
Oh, my.
There's a higher incidence of cataracts due to the UV exposure. You're closer to the equator, the greater the UV exposure, the higher the chance of developing cataracts. Very common that you'd see a condition called pterygium, which is a growth on the cornea that goes over. That's also UV induced and just environmentally induced. They called it carnicidad, meat tumor that they have on their eyes. And that would induce a lot of astigmatism in the patients. So they would lose their vision from the astigmatism. the eye is an amazing organ, and it has its own healthy protective mechanisms, lysozymes that help, immunoglobulins that help to decrease infection. And realistically, there's very little bacterial infections there. Probably about the same incidence of glaucoma that we see here in America. Maybe about 0.5% of the people, predominantly as they get older, will develop glaucoma.
That's pretty amazing. You know, I would expect more eye diseases to be associated with being at the poverty level and poor diet and that kind of thing.
A lot of the visual needs that the patients have, as opposed to medical things that we find when we're down there, the biggest concern is they just can't see because they need glasses to read, or this certain number of the school children have become nearsighted. And so the glasses that we bring down, either used and donated glasses or new ones that we've purchased and brought down with us, allow them to see.
That must be incredible for them. You know,
it's an eye-opener for some of them.
Yeah, really. All right. Now, I also wanted to focus on the fact that you are a mountain climber. And how did you become interested in that sport? Did they call it a sport?
Oh,
I mean, it's considered a sport.
I guess it's an avocation more for, I mean, there are professional mountain climbers that go up. You know, I just enjoy being up on top of the mountain, having that view to the horizon that allows you to see out to the sunrise, the sunset. It's always been just a joy for me. Turns out several years ago, it would have been 1999 in December, my roommate, who was the president of the Vosh group in Pennsylvania, says they were going to have a fundraising trip to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And it's a climb for sight. And the climb was going to go in February, and we were trying to raise money for the clinic in Guatemala. So we had patients and people pledge money. And in, 2 months basically, under 2 months, I raised $7,000 in donations for a climb for sight, which was actually harder to ask for money than it was to climb 19,340 feet.
I understand.
And we just had a tremendous trip out there, and they've been doing that since then. You can Google Climb for Sight, and it's climbforsight.org. And if you're in reasonable shape and want to donate to a good cause, you can climb up and be on top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
You know, I think it's just very interesting that something that you really enjoy has overlapped into something that you're doing to help other people.
It is. It's a lot of fun to be able to utilize your skills and in a positive way, and bring changes in the world, even if it's just a small way as you go through.
And what kind of training is required for you to climb mountains, or how do you find time to train? What do you do here in Lynchburg?
I'm the world's most undertrained person as far as doing things. I've sort of always followed the Nike ad, just do it, and if you do it enough, you stay in shape. So I've never been a great primed athlete, but I've never been out of shape.
That's great.
Some of that came about from my ultra running, where I've run several of the local ultra marathons that are held in our area.
That's great.
And if you run a few of those, you know that you can keep enduring, you keep moving forward, constant forward momentum, and you get to where you want to go eventually.
Well, I just think it's wonderful. Have you made any other significant climbs besides Kilimanjaro?
Apparently I induced this joy in my children because we've gone out to Colorado and to California and climbed some of the peaks out there. We did Mount Elbert and Mount Massive on successive summers, along with a couple of the other 14ers, and those are the second and third highest peaks in the continental United States. They're above 14,000 feet.
That's just wonderful.
I think they're 14.4.
Now, you brought some absolutely beautiful pictures. Phil, if you'll put the pictures up on the monitor, we'll get Frank to tell us what they are.
I think this is Mount Rose near Lake Tahoe, which was actually last summer. We went out there and did a day hike. I think you're about 13,500 feet. And to be that high with that much water around was really a beautiful day. And those are my children, Jordan and Carter. And they're, like I say, they are disappointed if they don't get to be on top of a peak with me.
That's wonderful.
This is top of the world in Africa. That's the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. After hiking all night, starting about 1 o'clock in the morning, we got to the rim of the caldera just as the sun rose and climbed around. That's one of the last, the glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro are disappearing. So that may be one of the last times you get to see a photo of the glacier up on Kilimanjaro. They projected that somewhere in the 2020 range that the last of the glaciers will disappear on Kilimanjaro.
What a loss.
So you're above the clouds and literally above where the airlines fly from Lynchburg to Charlotte when you're there. And again, that's the top of the peak. Since I've been up there, they've changed the sign. That was a model together sign that says you're up at 5,890 meters, which is 19,340 feet.
Oh my goodness.
And it was probably about 10 degrees there. That is actually climbing down the pyramid in Tikal, one of the Mayan ruins in Guatemala. This was actually my second trip there. The first one that we did as a recreation and break after doing our clinic mission trips, we climbed up on the top of the pyramid, watched the sunset, watched the clouds were so clear, the skies were so clear you could watch satellites go across the earth.
Right.
And then we had to climb down in pitch black. And that was
for me.
And I was the only one with a flashlight, being the old Boy Scout. And I just stood at the top with the flashlight, holding it down and climbing on down. This is actually in Torre de Paine National Park in Chile. It's down in Patagonia, and that wasn't a mission. It was a couple of the doctors that I went on one of the Guatemala trips, and we decided that we were going to just do some trekking, and it's about as far south in the Americas as you can go.
It's just so beautiful.
And I think any American should recognize the Grand Canyon, which I actually was able to live for a summer as a Harvey girl. In between first and second year of optometry school, I lived there and worked as in one of the curio shops. So I climbed all the trails and hiked around there. 3 days after we left to come back to school, one of my classmates who knew that we were out there, and this was before cell phones, stopped in at the canyon to see what was going on. He went for a day hike and fell 300 feet to his death. So, and they have about 6 people a year fall in to the canyon off the trail. Just the cutest kids in Guatemala. They're just adorable. They steal your heart away. And in this particular mission trip, we had such a crowd outside that we had to cordon off the room and only let a certain number of patients in. So it's not quite as crowded as some of the other ones. But for the most part, the children are healthy. If the tough survive. And I believe that is Mount Elbert in Colorado. Got up to the top of that a few years back. Just a real nice day hike up. You start off early in the morning and just, the Africans call it poli poli in Swahili, slowly, slowly. You just hike slowly to the top. And that way you try not to get altitude sickness. And
I didn't know there was such a thing as altitude sickness, but I imagine it's because the atmosphere is thinner.
Less oxygen, get some weird things, brain swelling can happen. You get lung problems. A lot of people will get headaches. This is another one of the things that you can't do in America. This is volcano Payque, which actually I think recently erupted in Guatemala and stopped some of the flights. But you can trek right up to the rim of the volcano, and that little mound that's right behind me is burping lava as I sat there. The Park Service here would never allow you to be that close to lava, but down there it's just, as long as they have people wanting to do it, they'll hike them up there.
That's beautiful.
Rocky Mountain National Park. That's up in the high country there. And America has some beautiful parks.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I'm trying to go to all of them, and every American should. It's a great resource that we have. And that is actually Mount Rainier, I believe. My children did not like me on that trip because I had the food in the backpack. And they wanted to stop, and I said, no, we're going to that rock. So we hiked over to that rock, and they had to follow me because I had the lunch.
I'm not sure I'd follow you up there.
If you were hungry, you would.
I have a fear of heights, although I enjoy flying in a plane, but I have a terrible fear of heights.
Yeah. And again, this is Mount Kilimanjaro, the morning sun coming up, you're above the clouds, and just there was such a solitude. You're above where birds fly. It was just quiet.
I can't imagine.
And everybody who went on that mission trip and did that climb came back to America, and there was a total reequilibration. We had to have the pace of life here compared to in Africa. And one of our guides said that in Africa, time is your friend. In America, time's your enemy. In Africa, time's your friend.
That's an interesting way to look at it. All right, now, I heard a rumor that you were going to climb Mount Everest.
No. I want to see Mount Everest. So there's a trek that goes to Everest Base Camp, and another peak called Kalapatar that sits back. It's about 18,300 feet. And so you get a very wide view of Everest. The climbing all the way to the top really has a skill level that I don't have or a desire to do.
But how exciting that would be.
Yeah.
All right. If you could say one thing to this audience about the mountain climbing experience, how exhilarating it is, what would you tell them? How does it affect you?
Everybody needs to be able to find their special place. And for me, the special place is that view to the horizon on top of the mountains. And we're lucky to live in an area where we have that access. Right. And it's just as nice being on top of Sharp Top as it is being on top of one of the 14ers. You get that beautiful view that just fills your soul and quiets your day.
Was there any one thing that got you into mountain climbing, or is it just something you felt like you felt compelled to do from birth?
I think there are beach people here in Virginia,
right.
And there's mountain people, and I just turned out to be the mountaineer.
Right, now your mission trips, that must be very rewarding for you, and especially if you can do a little mountain climbing at the same time. Just if you could sum up how that makes you feel.
Well, there's the reward of being able to give back, and I've always loved the work hard, play hard.
Right.
And usually go down there and we work really hard for 3 or 4 days, and there's just such a great team building with the team, but the rewards of working with the local community. It's really made me be a citizen of the world, not just a citizen of America. Most of the people that are there are just doing the same thing that we're doing here, right. Trying to take care of their family, and they have different hurdles that they have to overcome because of their geography or their station in life. But it is really rewarding to be able to help them. And when I look at a map, I say, I've been there, I know what the people are like, and there's always nice people there. You always meet nice people on these trips.
Well, I admire you so for what you do to volunteer your time to help people who are really in need. And I also am in awe of you for climbing anything higher than a ladder. All right. Do you have a website or a Facebook page if people wanted to?
I do. Actually, my office is under drfrankvilla.com, and our Facebook is under Dr. Frank Villa /optometrist.
Okay.
So I'm not much of a Facebook person, but there are some posts in there. My staff usually gets me to do some fun things.
I think it's wonderful.
We enjoy our patients here in Lynchburg are lovely people,
Right.
And it's a pleasant place to come in. It's a pleasant place to work, and so.
Well, I certainly thank you for being my guest on this show. I wonder if your patients are aware that you climb mountains. Do most of them know that?
I think a good many of them know. A lot of the patients will ask, "Where you been? What's your last mission? What's the next one you're doing?" And it's always good. I think it's good for everybody to have a goal, to have something to look forward to have something to go out and accomplish.
Right.
And I always have one trip or another on the horizon.
Well, I think you're pretty remarkable. Keep in touch. Let us know what you're doing, and maybe after you climb Everest, you can come back and tell us about it.
I'd love to do that, Linda.
Thank you
It's a
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. My next show will feature the Relay for Life. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.